Hello,
It's
Saltines.
not. Is it recording?
Yeah, I think we're recording.
Oh,
Yeah, recording in
oh,
progress.
so it is.
So I think we're recording.
Oh, cool.
Oh
Awesome.
my goodness, this is what happens when you have two people who are not technical trying to do technical things.
It's okay.
Um,
It's I just lost my strength. So,
yes, I'm so sorry. I'm going to try so hard not to clear my throat all the way through this episode, this recording, but something is getting to me. I'm having an allergic reaction to something. It's been a minute since I coughed all the way through an episode, so hopefully we won't be back to those days. Yeah, I'm sure have noticed by now that we are missing Mia this evening. Mia is ill. And she should be back for our next episode though. So we will all miss Mia together for this episode.
yes.
Um, and miss her amazing astrology guidance. But we still had some cool stuff to talk about this week. I wanted to start us off with a glyph that I pulled this week. Oh, it's so nice we don't have all the horrible glare from our ring light this time. So this week, geomancy, I pulled the glyph Cauda, Draconis, or the Dragon's Tail. Those of you who watch the podcast on YouTube will probably remember the last episode we had these kind of the sister glyph or figure to Cauda. We had Kaput Draconis or the dragon's head, right? You'll notice that like these glyphs are kind of funny because basically they're just kind of like mirror images of each other, right? Most of the glyphs in geomancy actually kind of work this way if you're familiar with them. Um, the dragon's tail is interesting because where we had on the last episode the dragon's head, which was a representation of a door opening, the possibility of new beginning once we had a chance to kind of clear out some old stuff and kind of assign to us that we needed to be really ready to let go of some old things and embrace a new beginning. And God knows I have definitely seen that happening in recent days.
Oh, yes.
That's been a big energy in my life in the last week in particular. Um, Now what we're seeing with the dragon's tail is we are seeing a door closing, and so with that kind of kind of turning, what I would want to say there is that the last couple of weeks, as we've had a chance to see uh maybe things leaving as we've had a chance to see some sort of turnover in our lives. There does now seem to be some sort of influence that is bringing that chapter to a close. So again, I want to remind you all of some of the guidance that I shared on our last episode. If you have had to say goodbye to something, if you have had to say goodbye to someone in the last couple of weeks, even in just the last few days, as hard as that has been, I want to encourage you to obviously feel what you feel, but try not to lament, try not to grieve that situation or that person too much. The fact that that situation has come to an end and the fact that that person is maybe now gone is like this is what was meant to happen. This is some universal force, some higher power stepping in and is basically like pulling you out of a situation that had it continued could probably have proven to be like a like a huge tower moment
Yeah.
for you. Like this is one of those moments I think where we are spared a lot of trouble. And we sometimes never even
Or
realize
further
it.
trouble. Yeah.
We never even realize it because something else kind of steps in and saves us before it really gets so bad.
Yeah.
So just have a little bit of faith in that, right? That if any you've seen an end to something that it's a good thing. You're not missing anything with a little bit of time and a little bit of healing. Life is going to be so much better.
Yeah. It's funny that that glyph happened because I did do a little bit of a session day where I just kind of sat down and opened up and worked with Hecate.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I got some cards from the Hecatean Path Oracle.
Okay.
I got Severance, which is all about cutting ties, letting go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kaleidokos, one door closes, another door opens. And then this one has been following me around a lot lately, which is Apotropeia.
Oh, okay. Which is, when we talk about apotropaic, the term apotropeia,
Hmm.
apotropaic kinds of things. We hear that term a lot with like apotropaic kinds of talismans or
Hmm.
amulets, right? What apotropaic is like to defend,
Yeah.
right? If something is apotropaic in nature, it defends or protects,
Hmm.
right? So Hecate apotropeia would be an epithet associated with Hecate that would be like a protector,
Yeah, shield from all
right?
harm.
So yeah. So is that the interpretation of that card in that
Yeah,
oracle?
yeah. What, and that's exactly what it is it's making sure that you are trusting in the cutting of the ties and the opening and closing of doors and
Okay.
knowing that you are safe.
Okay.
As long as you follow your path and as long as you follow that torch, then it's okay.
Okay. All right.
And it's not about blind faith. That's something that it does say. It says it's not about having blind faith that nothing can harm you. It's about knowing that nothing can harm you simply because you don't let it, or simply because you have already closed the door to it.
Okay. All right. So confidence in action
Yes.
or decision rather than just okay. All right. Okay. Yeah, I find that
Yes, it also is like the goddess has your back. And I'm
yeah,
like, great.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean that's the nice thing about Hecate, right? Is that she does have your back, you know. If for no other reason than she's there to push you right into the traffic,
Yes.
right?
Let's see how your Frogger skills are.
In a good way. In a good way, you know. In
Try
no
don't
way,
let anything hit you.
in no way am I trying to
Something might tap you a little.
yeah,
You might get a
in
graze.
no way am I trying to shit talk the goddess. I absolutely adore her. But she is definitely one of those that's like, this is kind of this is kind of an experience I think you need to have,
Well,
and
also
yeah, and
if
it's
we
gonna
think about
suck.
it,
So, but here you go. You're like,
well, we also if we think about it, it's like, okay, how many chances did you have for the crosswalk that you
yeah,
stood there and you too scared to
yeah,
move? So we're just gonna push you out. You're gonna make it out the other
yeah,
end,
yeah,
but yeah, you
yeah,
should have went when you had your chance.
yeah. She's very much like that. Yeah. So that's funny. Huh. Okay. Hmm.
So it was very interesting.
Uh,
Um, I was gonna sit down and do like a full channeled message.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, I did not do that today. I got preoccupied with other work.
Well, you had a busy day. Let's talk about that a little bit because this morning, you kind of had to get up and kind of get going, because early this afternoon you were kind of a guest. You were kind of a featured voice on another podcast. Let's
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit because we love to kind of talk a little bit about or kind of share what other people are doing. So what is this other podcast? Because I'm not familiar with this.
So this other podcast is called How Do You Spirit? And it's actually run and operated and produced by two of our customers here, a mother and a daughter.
Oh, okay.
And they live a little bit further away,
Okay.
you know, but they do come out here. When they're out here, they always stop by the store.
Okay.
And it was a couple weeks ago that the mother actually came in for the first time. Her daughter brought her in.
Oh.
And her mother just absolutely loved the shop. And, she came in and she was looking for sage. And I was like, oh, well, we don't
Did
carry
you
sage.
yell at this
No, I
woman?
said, we don't carry
Okay,
sage.
okay.
I said, we don't carry sage, but, the Native American Trading Post does.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh, well, I want to support you. What kind of smudge sticks do you have? And I'm like, well, we have these herbal bundles that
Yeah.
are, we have rosemary, this, that, the other. And she was like, oh, I love the smell of rosemary. I was like, yeah, rosemary is great for purification, protection.
Mhm.
And like, it's great to just have, she was like, oh, I should use this to cleanse instead of white sage. And I was
Mhm.
like, yeah. And she
Mhm.
was like,
Yeah.
I kept
Yeah.
getting that feeling that I shouldn't,
Yeah.
that I shouldn't. So I'm not going to. So I'm like, okay, cool, great, awesome. So she's pretty cool, but she wanted me to share spooky stories.
Okay.
And as our listeners and watchers know, it's hard for me and Mike to share spooky stories because we don't react the same way. And
Yeah.
so I was sharing stories and she was getting shivers and just kind of sharing experiences
Mhm.
and basically I sat down and she was just like, "We want you to ramble. We have no questions for you.
Yeah.
Just
Oh,
go."
okay. Oh God. Did they
And
regret that decision later?
no,
Oh, okay.
I don't
All
think
right.
so. It
Okay.
was it was really good. We shared some personal stories and
Okay.
I shared the story of the 8-year-old boy being
Okay.
possessed.
Ah, okay.
I shared, I hope you do not take umbrage with this. I did say this is my partner's story, but I shared your story with the thing running across the roof.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then I
Okay.
shared about my first encounter with a spirit when I was 11.
Okay.
And so yeah, it was really pretty interesting because
Mm,
it was one of those things where it's like, so they don't just show up how they were living. I'm like, no, sometimes they show up how they died.
yeah.
Actually, more often than not for me, that's how they show up.
Yeah.
And as an 11-year-old, it was terrifying,
Yeah.
you know?
It can be. Yeah.
And but as I kind of grew and I just got into it, whatever.
Yeah.
So it was pretty cool. I enjoyed it. So hop on over. They have some really interesting episodes.
Okay. And what was the name
Um,
of that podcast again?
How do you spirit?
How do you spirit?
Yeah,
Do we know where they can be found?
they can be found on all major streaming platforms and even YouTube and TikTok, just like
Okay.
us.
All right. Oh, cool. Very nice. Please go check them out.
Yes,
Yeah.
they are most definitely. If you listen to their podcast, you'll be like, how did they let Austin on the podcast? Because it's
Yeah.
kind of like with Star, how if you look at me and my Reiki teacher together,
Hmm.
it's very much like, how do they mesh? But we get along really, really great
Oh.
because we can speak each other's language.
Oh, okay. All right.
Um,
Okay.
and so that's very much kind of the vibe. Like
Gotcha.
very a little bit lighter, a little bit more on the new agey
Okay.
side, but that's okay.
It's
You
okay.
know,
I mean, yeah, we've been at this for a long time, and we interact and deal with everybody.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
so
they wanted me to talk
yeah,
about
yeah.
experiences I had with daemons and
Huh.
demons, and if I had any
Okay.
experiences with angels, and I was like, I would much rather work with a demon than an angel. Angels just
Yeah.
go, why do you need money? Demons go, I want that pretty pocket watch and it'll happen.
Yeah, that's
And
true. Yeah, it's
and
like,
she
oh,
kind of
okay,
chuckled.
I'll do a favor for you in exchange for, this candle like once a month and this particular ritual, and just give me some fresh meat every now and then. And yeah, the angel's like, oh, you want a new job? Okay, I'm gonna like completely destroy this building, and then this other building will open up in your neighborhood, and then they'll offer you a job.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, please don't do that. Please don't do that. Like,
That
yeah.
was way too literal.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So yeah, it was really
Uh,
pretty cool. Go ahead and head over and check them out.
Yeah, okay. It's cool that you bring that up because we are kind of in that season, and in past years on the podcast, we've actually done episodes where we've shared scary stories,
Hmm.
and just to kind of retouch on that conversation a bit, we kind of have clarified on prior episodes where it is not to say that we don't get scared. Because I absolutely have those moments.
Oh
Like
yeah,
even
most
here in
definitely.
the shop, like our shop spirit William, like there are still moments where I'll be here in the shop by myself at night, depending on what I'm doing. And if the shop is particularly quiet, and depending on what kind of headspace I'm in, where I'll walk down the hallway or I'll go into the reader's room, which is where he likes to hang out quite a bit. And if I'm just not anticipating, I'm just like I said, depending on the headspace I'm in, like he'll like jump scare me
Hmm.
and so it is not to say that we don't get scared. I think it's this weird dynamic that I think when you do this kind of work professionally and you're exposed to
It
spirits of
becomes your normal.
different kinds, those experiences, they do become normal.
Yeah.
And so what would maybe be a really scary experience for someone else is kind of just like, oh yeah, and that happened today.
Yeah.
Kind of like, for some of us,
Yeah.
which gets tricky because we have these experiences or these people, excuse me, that come into the shop sometimes who relate these experiences. And I feel badly sometimes because there's one story I remember, a client of mine who came in who had what I think for her was definitely an empirical kind of an experience where um, woman was like, I would say was like, would qualify as an atheist, in that she had never really had an experience with the supernatural,
Hmm.
which we're understanding now more and more is not super at all. It's just natural because these things exist. They always have. They're just another part of our world. They're around us all the time. And she had never really had an experience of her own, though, and she didn't really believe in anything, and then she moved into this house and she, over the course of a few months of living there, she started to kind of feel, I think, like this growing sense of just insecurity and anxiety in
Hmm.
the house. And the story she told me, and actually the reason she came to see me as a psychic, she came to see me for a reading. Um, and she was one of these like really cagey kinds of clients where she showed up and she was like, just, like, I'm not going to tell you anything. I just want you to tell me what you see. Right.
Hmm.
And as I was telling her what I was seeing and what was coming up at her reading, like I could see in her some of her responses and like her body language because she was shifting and moving like I could see that I was making her uncomfortable,
Hmm.
and I and by extension, by as a result of that, she was making me uncomfortable, because I don't ever want to make anybody uncomfortable, so I'm telling her in her reading, that I could see oh, you recently had an experience that was for you kind of like a life-changing kind of an experience, like this is something that you never thought you would ever experience anything like this. And it was, and it's something that has kind of left you now really kind of doubting a lot of what you previously thought you believed. You're not really quite sure where you go from here, but at the same time, it's also in a weird way, it's opened up a door for you. It's like in a weird sense, your life has now become bigger than it was before, and that was kind of how I was interpreting her reading, or the information that was coming through, and she kind of at the end of the reading, she validated. She said that the real reason that she came to see me is because she had had an experience just a couple of days prior to meeting with me where she had heard noise in her house at night, and she lived in this house with her husband, but I think if I remember correctly, her husband, he traveled for work.
Hmm.
And so she was in the house by herself, and again, they'd only been there for a few months, and she was already feeling like this anxiety about this house, right? And so she was there by herself, and she woke up in the middle of the night and she'd heard noise in the house. And and people behave oddly, in situations. But she, and I didn't want to ask her at the time, but she's telling me this story about she heard noise downstairs. And so she gets up and she goes out of her room. And from where I guess how the room or the house was arranged, she walks out of her bedroom, and as she's walking out of her bedroom, she can see down like a flight of stairs,
Hmm.
basically. And so she is looking down the stairs, and she sees what I can only describe based off of her information as like a shadow person
Hmm.
standing at the bottom of the stairs. Um, and she is explaining to me that this shadow figure, as soon as she stood at the top of the stairs, and it was one of those moments where you're having an experience and
You
you
freeze.
freeze.
Hmm.
Like she just froze.
Time just kind of
And so,
stands still.
yeah, and so she's standing there at the top of the stairs and she's looking down. And then she realized, because she said that as she was staring down, she realized that the thing at the bottom of the stairs was staring up at her. And she said, and she doesn't know how she knew it was looking at her, but she could tell. She's like, I could tell this thing was standing down there staring up at me. And we were just standing there staring at each other. And she said that everything was still, like she was frozen, it wasn't moving. She said, and then it started to move, and it wasn't moving toward her. Like it just kind of started to like sway or move. And as
Hmm.
soon as it moved, like she freaked and she like ran back into her room and like slammed the door and was like, because she was sure this thing was like going to bolt up the stairs after her or
Hmm.
something, right? Anyway, but she had this experience though. And for her, this was like just expand, like that just blew her mind open,
Hmm.
to have this experience, because for her this confirmed like holy shit, like all of these things that I've never put my belief in, that everybody has told me like this shit is real. I've had this experience. People have told me had told her like ghost stories that they'd had, experiences that they'd had, and she'd never experienced anything on her own, and then she'd had that experience. And so she came to see me and she's like, I have to believe in these things now. Like I had this experience, and she was terrified. Like in that reading, that's why she was so uncomfortable in the reading, because I was giving her information, and the information I was giving her was basically making her like relive the memory of
Oh.
the experience, and so I had to kind of talk her down, and kind of give her the like, hey, shadow people aren't evil. Like you'd already been in the house for months at this point. So if this thing really wanted to hurt you, it probably already would have,
Hmm.
So I had to kind of give her the talk, like the shadow person talk, like these are things are not evil. You don't need to be, you know, um, yeah, and so it's funny though when I think about like your conversation today and different people and their experiences, and and how we all have different thresholds of fear when it
Hmm.
comes to like the supernatural and ghosts and things. I always think of that scene from like that the second Addams Family movie where they're at the camp and like all the snotty girls are like telling ghost stories,
Hmm.
and she like the one snotty girl finishes her ghost story and all the other girls are like all ah.
Yeah.
And then what's her name?
Wednesday.
Wednesday. She tells a ghost story about how their old noses grow back and they all shriek,
Shriek.
because that's their fear, right? That's
Hmm.
what based on their values, that's what they're afraid of, right? So I just always think of like different people are afraid of different things.
Well, it's true. It's
Yeah.
true. And so it's just in those moments where I have to like go back to those points in time and I'm like, hmm. It's just very interesting.
Yeah. I don't know. It's funny. It's kind of funny. For me, it's funny.
It's a
I
little
will.
bit
I won't
funny.
say it's funny for other people because I mean other people are they're the ones dealing with that fear, and I probably shouldn't chuckle at that, but some of those experiences are funny for me. Um, God, I don't know whatever happened to that woman. She came to see me for that reading, and then I think I maybe read for her one time after that. And she at that point had I think she'd gotten involved with a ghost hunting team. Because then she like once she'd had that experience, like she was like, oh, like she needed to be
Full bore.
she was like all about it then. Yeah. But she didn't go the spiritual route. She went the pseudoscience, like she became like the ghost hunter,
Okay.
So she's like, I gotta prove that this shit's real to everyone else. And so I was like, okay, well, good luck with that, honey. You know, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. So anyway, but yeah, but I honestly don't know after that. I don't know what became of her. Hopefully she's still go hunting ghost and having
Maybe
a
she
good,
listens to the podcast.
maybe, I don't know. Hopefully she's still hunting ghost and having a good time. And that she's safe and happy. Um, anyway, I had a couple of other things that I wanted to talk about. Just little notes here on my phone that I made. I wanted to talk about kind of along the lines of the glyph that I drew and some of our other conversations, some of the feedback you got from your Hecatian oracle and
Hmm.
things like that, along the lines again of doors closing and letting go of things. I this last week has been a tricky one for not just me, but for a few other people that we're very close to.
Hmm.
And I think that I'm seeing some conversations like this right now as well, popping up a lot on like social media. And I think one of the one of the driving influence, what am I trying to say? I think one of the driving influences for these kinds of conversations or these situations in a lot of people's lives right now, to be honest, has to do with the fact that like we're like 2 weeks out from the presidential election.
Yeah.
And I think that the overall energy, the tone, the vibe that is putting on our country, on the US, I think has a lot of people feeling very tense. And I think that because of that, a lot of people are finding themselves in this place where they're looking at things in ways that are much more black and white,
Yeah.
maybe than they normally would. Um, And I think that because of that, a lot of people now are making decisions about connections that they've had in their lives for a long time, and they are choosing to say goodbye or to bring an end to things,
Hmm.
for good or for bad, and who knows? Only they can know that, right? Um, but I think that what I'm seeing popping up a lot in conversation, and definitely feeling this myself, is kind of the aftermath of making that decision, and the conversation around the necessity or just the value in actually admitting that there is indeed healing that is possible through being able to clearly identify toxic things that we hold on to in our lives, whether it be, decisions that we've made, addictive behaviors, limiting patterns of behavior that, maybe are like long time kinds of things, right? People, my gosh, people for sure,
Yeah.
that over time prove to be toxic, and I want to talk about that a little bit because I'm kind of the belief. And this is something that I've kind of gotten to in the last couple of years with a lot of what we've dealt with. We talked, I think, a couple months back on one of our first episodes back after we took a hiatus,
Hmm.
and we kind of revamped the podcast. We talked a lot about some of the grief that we had been through with the kind of the dissolution of a coven,
Hmm.
and having to say goodbye to a lot of people that were involved in that situation, and throughout that whole process, throughout the last couple of years, and even the last 2 months, as the dust has settled around a lot of that situation and continues to settle around a lot of that situation, my my belief in a lot of that, or through all of that, has really kind of gotten to the, or has consistently been that I don't always know, or I don't always feel that it's fair to label people as toxic. I think that a lot of the time what happens is you get people together, you get people involved in groups. And it is not that anybody in that group is necessarily toxic as an individual, but there is something that can happen in group dynamics that can become toxic, right? You see these weird behaviors in people, like people who act in ways that they would never act on their own. Like you get that person on their own, right? And as an individual, they would never behave that way.
Hmm.
But you get them in a room full of people, right? Or you get them in a group of people, and all of a sudden they switch and they become someone else, right? Um, and so I think that a lot of the time that we look at situations where we point a finger at someone and we say, "This is your fault. You're a toxic person." I think that a lot of that time that we need to kind of broaden our lens a little bit, and we
Hmm.
need to kind of really look at all of the dynamics around that. Because I think a lot of the time what we're really seeing is we're seeing that just that one player, just that one person's piece in kind of the overall play,
Hmm.
right? And yes, and maybe they are in that moment, they are behaving in a toxic way, but would they be if they weren't being given particular stimuli from other people that are also involved in that situation? Because as humans, I think we can all agree that we all have a tendency to kind of poke each other in
Hmm.
certain ways, right?
Yeah, most
Like
definitely.
I never try to be mean to you. I don't ever deliberately try to be mean to you. I never try to deliberately be critical to you, but I know that I am. Like I know that I can say things to you that can be
Hmm.
very critical. And I know that I can say things to you like in my brain, I'm thinking like, oh, I'm just being sarcastic and funny, right? But I know there are moments where you hear those things and you're like, oh, was he kidding? I don't know if he was
Those
kidding.
moments happen a lot, but that's because I
Like,
suck at reading body language and sarcasm.
yeah, like I know you have those moments, and I know you're not the only one. Like, I know that there are other people out there that have interacted with me over the years that are like, wow, Mike's a real dick. Like he said this today, and that really hurt my feelings. And then it'll come back to me like weeks later, and they'll be like, "You said this thing to me, and it really hurt my feelings, and fuck you." And I'll be like, "Oh God, I'm so sorry. Oh God, I would never. Oh, I would never try to say anything to hurt your feelings. I would never do that to you. I love you too much to ever do." And thinking back on that moment, I've been like, "Oh God, I was." I was just trying to be funny and playful and tease with you that day, and I really fucked that up. I'm so sorry. I in future I will not do that. You know? And so I think that that's just one example of how you can get people together, and because of just personality
Hmm.
and value system and different means of
Hmm.
communication, you can see those dynamics play out.
Yeah, well, it's also on the other person's end to make sure that they are checking in with themselves and going, do I know this? I know this person well enough to know that X, Y, Z, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you're talking about kind of like giving people the benefit of the doubt.
Hmm.
I think like getting to a point where if you've invested the time in getting to know somebody, to the point where you're like, you're my friend and I love you, or you're family and I love you, I care about you. You're somebody that I trust with my secrets. You're somebody that, like you're like my one of my ride or dies, like if there's somebody that you care about, that you connect with on that level, that should be somebody that you are absolutely willing to give the benefit of the doubt
Hmm.
in pretty much any circumstance. And if they do say something that comes across as like hurtful or shitty, in that moment, rather than getting angry, like immediately going to anger or defensiveness or being retaliatory, like reminding yourself, or remembering like this person does love me,
Hmm.
and I know that they would never intentionally do anything to hurt me, and with that in mind, instead of again kind of going to an angry place or stirring trouble, maybe saying like, hey, you said this just now and I heard it like this, but I'm kind of I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to say like I don't think that's how you meant it. Is that indeed the case?
Hmm.
And then give that person the chance to explain, right? Because usually if you do something like that, if that person really is who you think they are, and they really do love you the way that you think they do, they're going to come back with oh my God, you're right. I'm in a really fucking mood today, or bad mood today. I'm really tired. I was pissed off at this other person and I didn't have a chance to really hash things out with them. And you caught me at just the wrong moment, like whatever that conversation looks like, right? And I'm so sorry, you're right. I did not mean for that to sound that way,
Hmm.
you know? And so you're right. I think it's a combination of all of those pieces, right? Um, but having said all of that, I think that on occasion we do come across someone where we find ourselves in a situation, a dynamic of some sort that really is just genuinely just a toxic person or just a toxic situation.
Hmm.
And in those moments, I think regardless of how deep we've gotten, right, how strong we think the connection is, we really do owe it to ourselves to sever that tie. We have to. And we need to be honest with ourselves about that, right? Because maintaining any kind of connection with someone who is a toxic person, perpetuating any kind of situation that is toxic in general, is ultimately that's continuing to like drink the poison,
Hmm.
right? Like you're choosing, we are choosing to continue to pick that glass up and just drink another glass of arsenic, right?
Hmm.
Just drink another glass of arsenic, drink another glass of arsenic, right? Until it ultimately builds up to a point where it kills us.
Hmm.
We've poisoned ourselves, and in a situation like that, we really, when it does fall apart, I think that as angry as we might be at that toxic person, as angry as we might be at the toxicity of the situation, right? At that point, we need to, I think, kind of take responsibility for that ourselves too, right? Because we hung on.
Hmm.
We continued to show up. We continued to ignore the signs or believe the lies or yeah, I don't know,
Yeah.
right? We continue to do it,
We
and
made a pretty blanket out of all the red flags.
exactly. That's a good way to put it. So I don't know. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit because it just seems to be something that is happening for a lot of people right now, and there's a lot going on with that. I know celestially there are some planets and some stars aligned right now, I think that are certainly also encouraging some of that.
Blame the stars when we got them.
Right? We don't need to be accountable for our actions. We can just blame the stars. Um, right? But I don't know, but it's an important thing to remember, I think, let go. Let go of the old shit, like it's not worth it. It's not worth it. Now's a really good time. I did a weekly reading for the shop that I shared to some of our social media feeds just a day or so ago. And, one of the things that came up in that reading was basically that this time of year is a really significant time of year for kind of purging,
Hmm.
for release and letting go.
Tying off loose ends.
This is a year that actually has a lot to do with death, you know, um, and the ways that we as living people, the way that we work with death, the way that we acknowledge transition, the idea of transition around death. And so we can work with those energies. We can work with the current of death or the power of death and the dead, to help us to kind of facilitate processes of release. We can release, let go of things that really no longer serve us. And I would encourage all of you, our saltines, if you are looking for something to do as part of maybe a Samhain working or a Shadow Fest or Halloween rites, whatever you may call it, right? If you're looking for something to do and you're not quite sure what to do, let let Halloween, let that night, if you're doing ritual work, let some part of that work, in addition to honoring the dead, because that should be the main part of that work. It's honoring the dead. But let some other part of that work be about letting go. You know,
Write a eulogy.
yes, exactly. Write a eulogy for all of the shit
Hmm.
for the last year that you
The
just don't want to
relationships that
carry
have ended, the
forward.
doors that have closed, the opportunities missed, opportunities given that ended up being bad. Write a eulogy and read that out loud to your gods and to your spirits and toss that motherfucker in the fire.
Exactly, exactly. You
And
know,
then when it's done, it's done. You let that go.
yeah, that's the hard part I find, and that's the tricky thing. We've talked so much on the podcast about issues of spiritual bypass,
Hmm.
and it's funny when I think about that because as much as I rail against that, I think moving forward, I'm going to soften my approach on that a little bit because you've got a lot of people out there who are very quick to spiritually bypass. And I'm not talking light workers and new agers. I'm talking like people like witches
Hmm.
who are so quick to like, oh, I'll just throw a spell at it. I'll just throw a spell at it. I'll just throw a spell at it. And they do that, right? Because they think that'll fix it, right? And it's not to say that that doesn't help, right? Because who knows, right? They could do that spell and that could give them some result, right? But then they still don't do the personal
Yeah.
work as a component of that, right? Like they do the spell to help banish the influence or the energy, the lingering energy of like a really abusive ex-boyfriend, right? And that works really well,
But they're still
right?
following him on social
But they
media
still follow him on social media
and
and
they're still
and they
snooping.
still snoop and they still they still have pictures of him in their house,
Hmm.
and they still within themselves they can't let go of the need for closure, right? They can't let go of their anger and their hurt. They're not willing to do the work to really heal,
Hmm.
and so when I talk about spiritual bypass and how I sometimes get on a little bit of a soapbox about that, I think in future moving forward, I'm going to let that go because the reality is those people can throw every spell they want at those situations, but it's wasted magic
Yep.
because and the thing is in time they'll realize that
Hmm.
they'll
Well,
see that they'll
ultimately,
see
all it's going
that.
to do is put you in the same position, probably
Yeah.
worse.
Well, at the very least, you're pissing away a lot of money on magical supplies, right? That you're long term maybe not seeing a whole lot of benefit from. I think people get upset with us for that. People come in here and they're like, "Oh, I want to buy this, and this for spells," and a lot of times they come in and all of us in here are like, "You don't need all that shit. You don't need all that shit.
Well, I mean,
Don't buy all that shit
I
today."
let them.
So, well, I mean, we need to keep the lights on, so so we want people to buy
I
things in
always
the
tell them,
store,
you don't
but.
need that, but it's nice to have.
But I think that there are sometimes where people come in and they're like, "Oh, I need to buy all these things," and it's one of
And they
those,
get overwhelmed.
yeah, and it's one of those situations where it's like, okay, well, let's sit down and actually have a honest conversation about what you really need.
Yeah.
Okay, because no, you don't need all of these things, right? You can accomplish this very easily with just one or two things,
Hmm.
right? Because the real work is going to happen in here,
Hmm.
right?
Which is then in turn supposed to ripple out.
Exactly, and so I think people get confused or they get frustrated with this though because they come in there and they have this idea of like, oh, I need all of the accoutrement. I need all of the gadgets and all of the tools and all the paraphernalia. And while those things are certainly fun to have, um, you don't need all those things most of the time, right?
Well, and if you think about it, there's a lot of stuff going on just in alternative spiritual circles. Like I had someone come in asking for intention paper, and I was like, paper?
Yeah.
No, it's the kind that you like take and you roll up. I'm like, oh, you mean parchment paper that they sell
Mhm.
expensively is wish paper
Yeah.
that you write with a very light pen, very light pencil with,
Mhm.
so that it flies away. Yeah, I
Oh,
need
it's
that to
just
do this spell.
it's just tissue paper, y'all.
Exactly.
Go
And
to the dollar store and just buy
exactly.
buy a big thing of
And
tissue
I and I
paper
I
and cut
told
it
this
into
person that,
squares.
and they just like you could just see like the magic just,
Yeah, it
and
does
I'm
kind of.
like,
I think that's why they get upset with us sometimes. Is we kill the magic. It's like we're trying to give you a little bit of reality, right? Like you can still have your magic and still have reality. You don't. It's not an either or situation. It's a have both because you'll find it'll work better if you have both.
get some parchment paper, cut
Uh,
it into squares, soak it in a tincture made of dragon blood, let it dry, and then light it on fire. Boom, intention paper.
Yeah, there you
Infused with
go.
the spirit of dragon's blood,
There you
which is
go.
just going to amplify it.
Let it soak in coffee, and then whatever it is you do with it will happen faster because coffee's so good for speed.
Unless you're
You know?
doing a binding spell, then do skullcap.
Yeah, there you go. That would be better. Yeah. Oh God, look at us. We're dropping the spell tips. That's okay. This is what we do. We're old practiced witches, right? Except, you know what? I'm not identifying as a witch anymore. You know, I was talking about this with you the other day, and I'm entering my warlock era. You know, for years I have resisted the use of that term because I did grow up kind of with that old school idea that the warlock, that word warlock, was always kind of an indication of somebody that was an oath breaker, somebody that had betrayed their coven, or somebody that had sold out other witches or other practitioners. And, you know, and I'm at a point right now, you know, and I don't believe all that bullshit about how, like, oh, a warlock is just a male witch, because the word witch is gender neutral. Witch is male or female. It doesn't fucking matter. Anybody can be a witch, right? Male, female, they, them, non-binary, it doesn't matter, right? But I've decided, particularly in light of a lot of what we've dealt with in the last couple of years with all of the ex-coveners and, you know, the dissolution of the coven, and so many of those people pointing fingers at us, and, you know, and saying that, you know, like, you're the problem, like me, like, you're the problem. You didn't listen to me. You didn't give me enough time. You didn't do enough. And I'm like, I didn't do enough. I couldn't have done more. Like, I would have, like, you would have had to become my full-time job if I were going to do any more for you as a high priest. You know, like, I would have had to give up everything else to facilitate this path for you. If, you know, and, you know, I was like, I couldn't have given you more. I couldn't have cared about you more. I couldn't have loved you more. I couldn't have taught you more, you know, and all of it still came down to, like, it was never enough. And you betrayed me. And so with that in mind, I'm embracing it. I'm entering my Warlock era. And from now on, you can call me Warlock. I'm going with that. And I'm also, you know, and this is a personal thing, and there'll be a lot of people who will disagree with me on this, but I'm kind of the opinion that the word witch has become so watered down. Like, it doesn't mean anything anymore.
Yeah.
Everybody is a witch. You know, you've got Mormon housewives here in Utah, and I am not trying to diss or disrespect or shit on anybody's fun, right? And people can do whatever the hell they want to do, right? And they will. The thing is they will, regardless, because nobody gives a shit about my opinion, right? But we've got Mormon housewives here, like, I mean, good Mormon housewives. Like, they get up, they go to church, they're obedient to husband, you know, they've got 8 kids, they wear their garments, you know, they do all the shit, you know, and they decorate their houses with the witchy aesthetic, you know, and they love to, like, I'm a witch.
Yeah.
I'm witchy. And that's okay. The thing is, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that, you know, but you've got all of these different things now happening, kind of being folded in under the umbrella of that word, you know, and while it has made witch as a word, as an icon, witch as a thing, as an iconic figure, while it has made that in many ways publicly more palatable, it has also made it this nebulous kind of thing. It has taken the power and the mystery and the um it's taken a lot out of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean the same thing anymore.
Yeah.
And so I'm no
Well, it just
longer.
continues getting conflated with paganism as well. I
there
had
is there
someone
is
who was
that
in the
piece.
shop who was
There's that
like,
piece.
Are you familiar with paganistic practices like tarot? And I was like, well, tarot's a divination practice. It's not paganistic. And like I had to have the conversation of
It
no, like I know what you're talking about, you know? So I don't know if I'm gonna identify as a witch anymore.
I don't know. I think people, in no way am I trying to say, like, for the benefit of our self-beings, in no way am I trying to say that people should identify as a witch anymore.
Yeah, you identify
You know,
however you want.
we're pagan, or, a cult. cultist or magician, like I'm a chaos magician, right? And so I go by, I identify as a magician a lot, but that's also always kind of been a tricky term for me though, because you say you
Magician
go,
and people think Houdini.
yeah, like they're magician, like, oh, do a card trick. And I'm like, so so I don't know. I'm
I
I'm embracing Warlock.
I actually think I'm feeling more of a draw for myself towards the term sorcerer
There you go. Okay. All right.
because I do what I want.
There you go. One of the other things I wanted to talk about, and this is kind of a little bit of gatekeeping, kind of more for our psychic and our spiritual community. And I wanted to talk about this with our saltines because this is again another kind of thing that I'm seeing trending a lot. And this is not new. This is always the case. Um, but I want to talk about the saltines because, or this for the benefit of our saltines, because I know that a lot of you are in the position where you like to work with spiritual practitioners. You like to get readings. A lot of people like to get readings, right? And it can be very difficult
Hmm.
to know whom to work with. It can be very difficult to know if you're working with an ethical practitioner. It can be very difficult to know if you're, well, just that, really, in essence, right? And so I wanted to kind of talk about again and again and then again. This is something we've talked about on the podcast before, but it's been a little while. But I want to talk about this thing that I'm seeing once again with a lot of people going and seeing practitioners. I'm not even going to get into whether or not I think these practitioners are legit or not. But a lot of people going and seeing practitioners and this old I'm going to say con. Because that's how I identify it. I identify it almost as a con that a lot of people in the spiritual community play about people being under psychic attack. Like this thing where you go and you see this dynamic. So let me set this up, okay, for the benefit of maybe some of our saltines, okay, and to clarify what it is I'm actually saying, okay. But you see this situation where somebody is they've had a run of bad luck,
Hmm.
right? And it could be anything. It doesn't mean they're under attack. It doesn't mean that like they've been crossed or anything, but say like like they just have a couple of really bad days, like they've been fighting with their relationship partner, they get a flat tire on their car, they
Hmm.
have an unexpected bill, just like just life stuff, we all have those things, you know and but it's something that's happened enough. Say this person is maybe superstitious, and whatever it is that's going wrong in their life is just consistent enough that they decide, oh, I'm gonna go get a reading, and they walk into that room and they are
They've already made up their
already
mind they're
they've
cursed.
already made up their mind that they're cursed, that they're under some sort of attack, right? And they unfortunately they sit down and they meet with a practitioner, a psychic, whatever they may be, that is not as ethical as they should be, right? And somehow that information and that person's belief comes up in their reading, right? And you now have an unethical practitioner that is immediately going to pounce on that and say like, oh, yeah, you're under psychic attack. Like you've been crossed, like you've been like whatever that may be, right? Or
Hmm.
it could be, or like somebody's cursed you,
Hmm.
like, and because that we see that a lot with the witch community,
Hmm.
right? We're like, oh yeah, somebody's crossed, somebody put a curse on you,
Yeah.
which does not happen as often as people might think. There are a lot of people out there that are like, oh, I've been cursed, and it's like the type of skill, the amount of focus, and the knowledge that you have to really work an effective curse, like one that's really going to hit someone and stick, that's not as common as you think. Most of the time, people might be flinging an evil eye at you, but those things don't stick.
Hmm.
Like they're going to hit you. They might give you like a bad moment, right? But
I
within
mean,
a
they can snowball.
but within a few hours, yeah, they can snowball if you're not smart about how you handle that shit, and if you allow fear to build in yourself, yeah. But at that point, it's not the thing that the person sent at you, it's you.
Hmm.
At that point, you become your problem. So true curses are actually, I would say, a lot more rare than people think. They don't happen as often as you think. So stop feeling fear about these things. Don't be so afraid. Okay. Trust me, this is someone who has worked curses over the years. I'm telling you, those things really they don't happen as often as you think. Um, but I think that getting back to my point, you've got this situation out there where this person now is sitting with an unethical practitioner and they've now been told, like, oh, you're under psychic attack, you've been cursed, you've been crossed up, whatever it is, right? And this person is buying in. And at that point, they are now ripe for that unethical practitioner to basically take them for, we hear stories all the time, sometimes
Thousands.
thousands of dollars
Yeah.
for energy work and special amulets and talismans and rituals and ceremonies and things that are guaranteed to remove this curse, to protect this person from their enemies, whatever it is, right? And we
Mhm.
we hear this stuff like all the time, and so to our saltines, I want to say that if you ever meet with a practitioner and one of the first things that they say is that you are under attack, that you are crossed up, that you are cursed. And to be clear, this is someone that you are not really super familiar with, that you have not really been working with this person for a while, and you're just not entirely sure, just how
Who this person
ethical
is.
you think they are. Um, Get a second opinion at the very least. Like go and see another unaffiliated practitioner. I know that that can sometimes be a little bit of an outlay. Or, like if, yeah, sometimes you get lucky, like people will come into our store here, like I have got no problem, and in no way, I'm not trying to virtue signal here, okay? Because there are a lot of other places out there that will also do this, okay? But there will be people that will come into the store that'll be like, oh, I went to this other place and they told me that I was cursed,
Hmm.
and I will for free. I will stand at the counter. I will scan that person's energy field at the counter, and I will let them know right there at the counter for free. Like there are no curses. There is nothing in your energy field that
Hmm.
would register that would look like a curse. And if there is anything going on in your life that would register as trouble or bad luck for you, it's probably related to this. And it has nothing to do with a curse. It's tied to this unfortunate decision that you have made,
Hmm.
or this pattern that you perpetuate in your life, or this person that you keep around who is really bad news for you, but they're not a curse.
Yeah.
You're just dealing with the consequences of very mundane decisions and actions. And there are a lot of places out there that will do that. There are a lot of shops out there, metaphysical shops out there that have practitioners that are very kind and generous people that are happy to double check things for you like that are not going to charge you. So get a second opinion.
Yeah.
Okay, because I assure you, most of the time you are not under a psychic attack. You are not crossed up. You are not cursed. I would say like 90% of the time, that is not the case. You know, yeah, I get so frustrated with people just being taken advantage of, and I don't want any of you to be taken advantage of. Beyond that, I don't want any of you guys to be living in that kind of fear. Oh God, I can't imagine like God, how limiting and frustrating that is to be running around with these ideas. Like, oh God, there are curses everywhere, and people are always psychically attacking me, and
Yeah.
it's like that's most often than not. That's
That
not.
constantly just puts you in the position of victim. I'm
Yeah,
always the
yeah, that's
victim.
not how
Why are
things
people always
work.
attacking me?
Yeah.
Which then will perpetuate some of the issues that you are dealing with.
Yeah, that's true. If you fall into patterns of fear or cycles of fear and those beliefs, you're going to be your own problem. Yeah. I'm sorry, my phone is chiming. I apologize. Um, I don't know. That's really kind of all I had for tonight. I don't know. We don't need to keep going. We can kind of do a shorter episode. Like I said, we'll be back again in the next little while. We're in the next couple weeks with another episode, and Mia will return. So we'll have more astrological information. I always do that. I always drop the A, astrological information. Um, yeah, I just want to thank you all for kind of hanging in with us. As you guys have already figured out, I'm sure we're still kind of in the process of fine-tuning whatever this podcast is going to be. I honestly at this point don't know if we'll ever get it together. Um, we've done this now for, God, is it 3 years
Yeah.
now? God. you know, and I think our whole first year I have to kind of write off, mainly because we had so many technical problems that first year. You could only hear half of the episodes, and we had to delete a lot of the other episodes because we had someone on a lot of those episodes that ended up being a highly problematic person and we didn't want to continue to give them a voice.
Hmm.
So I don't know. Anyway, we're here. Please send us your questions. You know, we love to answer your questions. You can even leave them in the comments on YouTube.
Hmm.
And I know sometimes sending an email is a little tricky or takes too much time. So you can even just comment on the video on YouTube if you like. But ask us questions or give us ideas for things you want us to talk about. I mean, we got ideas. I always have notes on my phone, but it's nice to hear from you guys. At the very least, it lets us know that you want us to keep doing what we're doing. Sometimes it feels like we're kind of talking into the darkness here doing this podcast, and that's okay too, because as occultists, spiritualists, we talk into the darkness a lot. But it'd be nice to hear back every once in a while from you guys. Yeah, but if there's anything you want us to talk about, let us know. Um,
I really didn't say much this episode.
yeah, that's okay. It was a weird day. It's been weird days, and I think it's just the energy of the season. As we get closer to Shadowfest / Halloween. I always say Samhain because I think that so many in the pagan community identify it as such, and
Hmm.
I don't because I'm not Gaelic. My spiritual customs and traditions are not of those cultures. I'm not Scots, Irish, or Welsh. I'm not from that area, so people identify it as Samhain. Where it originates. From those cultures primarily, but I'm not that. Those aren't my spiritual customs or traditions. So I say Samhain because that's what people recognize, but
Hmm.
but it's Shadowfest for me, or Halloween, But I think as we get closer to that day, I think a lot of us, which is warlocks, sorcerers, magicians, occultists, practitioners, whatever you may call yourself, psychics, even mediums, I think a lot of us kind of feel that kind of like more of that weight that we see kind of associated with the dead.
Hmm.
I don't know. It slows me down. I don't know. I'll shut up now.
That's an episode. We'll
Anyway,
see y'all
thank you all
later.
so much. Please leave your comments and stuff, okay? And yeah, we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you so much. Okay, bye.